Let me introduce you guys to the Sundor region, a brand new Pokemon Fakemon region, and as you can tell by the map, it is based on Australia. Now, we're led by Professor Bottlebrush, who follows the theme of Pokemon professors being named after plants and trees, and Bottlebrush is a native to Australia, and I actually have some in my backyard, so that is perfect. Now, this region is created by Sundorfakemon, who you can find on Instagram, and I'm going to link to Instagram down in the description below for you to check them out, so let's get into it. First is our grass starter, which is called Rugby, and it combines kangaroo and rugby together, a very popular sport in Australia. It evolves into Kangravine, which is now a grass and fighting type. Makes sense when you have boxing kangaroos to make it a fighting type as well. And then lastly evolves into Trankscrum, which looks pretty angry, and as you can see, it's holding something which kind of looks like a football or like a rugby ball as well, and this Pokemon is very aggressive, especially when it comes to playing rugby. Our fighter starter is called Embala and combines a koala with ember as well, and you can see that kind of ember fiery color coming off the ears here. It evolves into Koaboom, which now is a fire and poison type Pokemon, and this Pokemon is all about overeating, and all the eucalyptus leaves it eats makes it into a poison type Pokemon. And then lastly evolves into Explosion, combining eucalyptus and explosion as well because of all that overeating. And I do love that this is on all fours here. Very interesting look for a koala, but it's also got like fiery embers, like fiery hair on its eyebrows and on its back as well. Very, very cool concept. And then our water starter, of course, is called Dolphin, which combines a dolphin with royalty as well, and you can see it's got a little bit of coral on its head. It evolves into Paw Prince, which is a water and rock type Pokemon. You can see that coral has become much bigger now and almost formed like spikes or humps along its back there, almost like a Stegosaurus in a way. But then its final evolution, Royal, is looking very, very regal. That coral has become multicolored now, which I think is very cool, and the coral definitely looks like a throne, and the dolphin is sitting back on the throne. It's got a crown of coral as well. So which starter are you going to pick, guys? For me, I think it's very difficult to choose, but I am going to go with the fire starter. I think this is a very cool concept, and I love the fire and poison coming together here. Let me know down in the comments which starter you're going to pick. Now that we have our starters, we can move into Route 1, and our Route 1 bug is called Brawlworm, a pure bug type, and it is based off the Hercules moth caterpillar, which you can see in the coloring there being mainly green with those bits of red elements as well, but those big yellow spikes on it are just like the Hercules moth caterpillar. As is tradition, coming into a cocoon now evolves into Scrapod. The cocoon actually looks like a boxing bag, which I think is very, very cool. And then our final evolution is Stalmoth, the bug and fighting type. So here's our Hercules moth element into here, but you can also see that it's got like boxing gloves on the end of it, which is a very, very cool concept. Our Route 1 bug actually has 4 different forms. It is called Kuklat, and it is a normal and flying type Pokemon, and the 4 forms are depending on its diet. So as you can see here, we've got bitter and spicy form, and you can see the coloring changes, and then we also have refreshed and zesty diet as well. These forms continue as it evolves into Pompobur, so the coloring, again, keeping the same coloring as it had before, and depending on the coloring, it has a special move based on that typing. So we have our grass, water, fire, and electric type moves based on the coloring here. And then lastly, it evolves into Gorkabara, still a normal and flying type, but again, we can see our 4 different colorings with our 4 different diets that change the colors and also change the moves that this Pokemon has. Next is Rombat, which is a pure normal type Pokemon and is based on a Wombat. Very cute here. This is also the Pokemon the Professor had, and it evolves into Rock'n'Roll. Very cool name. It is a normal and rock type Pokemon, and as you can see, it actually has elements of AC/DC, very famous Australian band, of course, but still is based on a Wombat. And next is Sugary, which is a fairy and flying type Pokemon and is based on a Sugar Glider, but its coloring is actually based on sweet and sour. And then evolves into Impungent, which kind of has like a bit of an evil look to it actually. Sugar Gliders are very sweet and cute, but as it evolves, kind of got an evil look to it. And then next is our first Sundorian form Pokemon. We have Sundorian Rattata, which is a ground and normal type Pokemon, and of course evolves into Sundorian Raticate. This is actually based on the kangaroo rat now. Has massive long tails, which are longer than the rest of its body. And then of course it wouldn't be an Australian region if we didn't have some snakes. So we have Kinslet here, which is a pure fire type Pokemon and has a flame onto the end of the tail, which is really nice. And it looks a lot like a red-bellied black snake. And then evolves into Python. So it's more so based on a desert python now rather than a red-bellied black snake, even though it kind of has that look to it, because in Australia there are lots of deserts, especially in the middle of Australia. And next is our Pika clone for the region, which is based on an echidna and is called Inkapaku. And I love how the spikes on the echidna have actually formed little lightning bolts. And next we have a pure dark type Pokemon called Ferritin, and it's actually based on the feral cats in Australia, which is a huge problem that kill a lot of Australian native wildlife. So a feral cat based Pokemon being a dark type definitely makes sense in my opinion. And it evolves into Ferrolinx, which is now a dark and steel type Pokemon, and you can see the steel elements coming in because the whiskers, but especially that tail looking like a steel knife is very, very cool. Next is a goanna-based Pokemon. This is a poison and dragon type, which is a great combo. It's definitely got spiky elements on the end of its tail there, but you can see that tongue being bright green is where it gets its poison typing. And then evolves into Gargawana, and that tongue is much, much longer now. Very toxic, but it also uses the tongue kind of like a whip. And we can also see the tail is spiked, almost like a scorpion tail, I guess, in a way, coming over like that. As I said, there's a lot of deserts in Australia, so of course we need a cactus-based Pokemon. It is called Wactus, and it is a grass and fighting type. And then evolves into Saguase, which combines that Saguaro cactus with Karate as well. This is definitely looking like a fighting type Pokemon, especially with that stance that it's got. And it wouldn't be an Australian region without some spiders as well. Of course, our first one is Spidry, which is a pure bug type Pokemon, and looks pretty cute. I like that. I like how it's got like a mohawk that's formed out of a web. I think that's very cute. And it actually has a split evolution. So if you evolve the Pokemon during the day, you get Tarantula, which is a bug and flying type, obviously making a parachute there out of a web because some spiders use their webs to get carried by the wind. But if you evolve it at night, it evolves into a bug and dark type Spidreary, which looks very evil and very sinister and is definitely based off a redback spider. You can tell by the coloring on the abdomen there. And another snake Pokemon. This one doesn't evolve. This is called Venopan and is a poison and ground type. And this is based on a desert Taipan. Very, very dangerous. Of course, we have animals that are gonna hurt you in Australia. Next is Caracal, which is a crab-based Pokemon, but he's also getting a lot of inspirations from the Great Barrier Reef as well. And then evolves into Scrabla. So that sand on the shell is now growing some coral now, which is interesting. And then lastly, Crustacean, which looks like an amazing Pokemon. It looks like it's got half a reef on its back there. Of course, it's got those rocks and sands and stuff on it as well, but it's got massive, sharp pincers. So a water and grass type, very, very cool looking. Another Sundorian form is Sundorian Tangler, which is actually based on the striped anemone, which is an anemone with very, very long tentacles that come out, just like you would imagine for a Tangler. But it has a new evolution in Tangrel. These are both pure poison types, by the way. And as you can see, those long, long tentacles coming out, of course. But you can also see that most of the face is covered, but we can see some big spiky teeth there. Next is Boudou, which is actually based on a boomerang. Obviously, the Aboriginals in Australia used boomerangs to do their hunting. This is actually a pure ghost type Pokemon, and I'm getting unknown vibes here because it's got that big one eye in the middle. But then it evolves into Reverang, which is now a ghost and steel type Pokemon. So again, based on a boomerang, but it combines a steel element into it now. Next is Pebblot, which is a pure normal type Pokemon, and it's based on a dingo, but has very muddy paws and a muddy tail, which you can see gets much more prominent as it evolves into Excanine. This is now combining our dingoes, but also with excavation as well. You can see it's got massive claws on its paws there as well, which become huge as it almost half turns into an excavator here. As it evolves into Terravager, those claws are massive now, like a big excavator, but still has dingo elements in there as well. Next is Sundorian Lickitung, which is actually based on a smooth newt, which is an introduced species into Australia, which is playing havoc on the ecosystem. So this is a Pokemon that we don't want. It's actually a bit of a nuisance. It's a pure fighting type Pokemon. As you can see, it's almost got like bandages on its knees as well, and a very angry expression. And evolves, of course, into our Licky, where the tongue actually makes a boxing glove now. Definitely a fighting type, but instead of punching, it's only got little arms. It uses its tongue to punch. And now is Shocker, which is a pure electric type Pokemon. This is actually based on a camel, because did you know that Australia has the largest feral camel population in the entire world? Of course, it evolves into another camel. This is called Dromarata now, and it's actually got a bit of an electric generator as its hump there. So it's got some mechanical elements in this camel. And then next we have a very sad looking Pokemon. This is called Sigmess, and it has the word mess in its name because it's actually based on oil spills, but also combines a signet in it as well, which is a baby swan, because it evolves into a black swan, which is called Swaggoose, a dark and flying type Pokemon. But this is a black swan because of the oil, because of the ooze that has affected it. Next, we're going into our two fossil Pokemon for the region. So the first one is Vampite, which is based on a vampire bat, but also combines stalagmites in it as well. You can see the different colors in the ears, which are based on the rocks or the stalagmites over millions of years. And then it evolves into Stalagool, so rock and dark type Pokemon, obviously looking like a giant bat, but it's very pointy from its ears down to the end of its wing as well, because it's based on the stalagmites and stalactites from caves. And then the other fossil Pokemon is Nibleaf, which is a rock and grass type Pokemon, and this is definitely looking like a dinosaur. It's actually based on an Atlas Coppercasaurus, which is a dinosaur that was found in Australia, which has that kind of skull look on the face. And then looking a lot more adult now as it evolves into Chlorosaurus, which is combining chlorophyll now with our Saurus, or with our dinosaur there. Next we have Cassowary, which is based off the cassowary, a very very dangerous Pokemon in Australia, so to see it sad and worried over here is a bit different, but it actually has two forms. We've got our worried form, and then we've got our angry form here as well. Definitely looking a bit more aggressive. This definitely matches the cassowary that we find in the wild in Australia now. And then another Pokemon that actually doesn't evolve, even though it looks like a first stage evolution, this Pokemon doesn't evolve. It is called Thragon, and it is a dragon and ground type Pokemon, and it's based off a thorny devil. Another Pokemon that doesn't evolve is Treemew, which is obviously combining tree and emu together, so this is a very cool looking Pokemon. Its feathers on its body is definitely like a shrub. It's like a shrub with legs and a head. Follett is a pure fire type Pokemon, which is based on a donkey, and as you can see, it's got that fire or that flame element in the tail and the head especially. And then as it evolves, it becomes a fire and ground type Pokemon. This is Boroferno. As you can see, doesn't look so helpless now. The pre-evolution kind of looked helpless and didn't do much, but this one is looking much more aggressive now. It's got smoke coming from its nostrils. It's got flames down its back for its mane, and then a flame on the end of its tail as well. Now, I absolutely love the Sundorian Chatot. This is looking really cool. It's looking just like a cockatoo, especially with the crest on its head there as well, but the coloring looks very, very nice. This is actually poison and flying type now, and it looks like it's a bit cheeky, which cockatoos definitely are. And next we have a Pokemon which is actually based on an Aboriginal mythological tale. This is called Lizzie Una, which is a fighting and steel type Pokemon, and it's based on a mythical lizard man called Birion, which is actually a fighter. So that's why this is a fighting and steel type. Now in Australia, we have a lot of sharks, so we need some shark Pokemon. This is combining a shark with a torpedo. This is called Torpup. It is a water and steel type Pokemon. As it evolves into Salacride, it's obviously gotten much bigger now. Not so much as a torpedo. Now it's actually forming more of a submarine. Now it's definitely looking more like a submarine as it evolves into Submegalodon. Submegalodon is the Pokemon, but it's actually shooting a torpedo out, but it just happens to be the pre-evolution. Like what Dragapult does at shooting out baby Droopies, this is giving the same vibe here. Now we've got our first ice type Pokemon. This is Snuppy, which is obviously based on a husky. Looks very, very cute. It evolves into Blizky, and I love that it's got a lot of icicle elements on this. We can see it's got ice spikes, but its paws also look like they're made of ice as well. This evolves into Mongrice, and it is an ice and dark type Pokemon. We can definitely see it's looking a lot more aggressive now. Still got those icicle spikes on it, and it's got icy paws with some wild bushy fur on it as well. And we have a Pokemon now that is based on the Australian Gold Rush. So this is Digger, which is a rock and ground type Pokemon. It's got a little mining hat. It's got a little pickaxe as well, which is very cute. But it evolves into Maggold, which is now a rock and steel type Pokemon. And I love this. It reminds me of the Monopoly Man with the top hat that it's got. But this Pokemon, based on the Gold Rush, has obviously struck it rich. He's got diamonds and gold and is looking very well off, I think. Next, we have a Pokemon called Toxifry, which is a pure poison type Pokemon. It's actually based on the Blue Ring Octopus. Very, very dangerous animal in Australia. It evolves into Electric, so now it's become a poison electric type Pokemon. And then lastly evolves into Coruscant, and this Pokemon actually shoots out electric rings at its opponent to stun them. Next, we have Spurtina, which is a pure ghost type Pokemon. Obviously, we've got like the Sydney Opera House and the Melbourne Symphony Orchestra and lots of musical elements in Australia. The hair almost looks like a music note as well. And then evolves into Specteza, which is now a ghost and fairy type. This looks like it's a conductor. I love like the hairstyle that it's got as well, like a traditional conductor. And then lastly evolves into Fantestro. So again, Maestro elements of music notes in there as well. Also kind of got a Phantom of the Opera vibe a little bit in here as well. And then next is our Sundorian Onyx, which is a rock and dark type Pokemon. A lot darker than the regular Onyx that we would see. And that's because it's actually based on the Kalkajaka, which is the Black Mountains, which are in Queensland. So I love that they've taken that element of the Black Mountains in Queensland, but turned it into an Onyx as well. Almost looks kind of evil. And of course evolves into our Steelix as well, our Sundorian Steelix. Definitely got that evil, corrupted kind of vibe going on. Next, we have Hopple, which is a pure normal type Pokemon based on the feral rabbit population in Australia, which went wild when they were introduced to Australia. And then evolves into Rabroot, which is a normal and fighting type Pokemon. Definitely looks very aggressive, very strong, very muscly. And those red and black eyes are actually kind of creepy. Devial is a pure dark type Pokemon based on the Tasmanian Devil, and it's also got elements of bandits in here as well. You can see on the head, it almost looks like it's wearing like a bandana. And that bandit kind of look continues. It evolves into Deverado. It looks like it's got like the prison stripes on it as well, and it's holding a gem. And our Sundorian Purloin is actually a pure ghost type now, and these are based on the Phantom Cat, which is like a mythical animal that people believe that they've seen in Australia before. Definitely following that kind of spectral dark element as evolves into our Sundorian Liepard. I love the like ghostly, wispy elements of darkness coming off it as well. Definitely fits the theme of these Phantom Cats. Next is Kudzug, which I think is very, very cute. It's a pure grass type Pokemon Pokemon is obviously based on a slug, but has some bushy elements on it as well. It evolves into Invadush, which is a grass and psychic type Pokemon. It's got very interesting eyes because this is actually combining elements of aliens and UFOs in now, which is very clear now as it evolves into Forestral. As you can see, it's combining things like terrestrial in there as well. It looks like it's a UFO with massive arms coming down. Next, we have a Pokemon which is based on a Firefly called Glixie. It's a bug and fairy type. I love the massive light bulb coming off its abdomen there as well. But this evolution, I think, is fantastic. Lead light. It looks like it's holding onto a lamppost, or it uses that stick maybe to guide it. Now, it wouldn't be Australia if we weren't talking about Vegemite, of course, a national treasure here. This is called Vegetot. It's a pure grass type Pokemon, and it looks like it's got a bottle cap on its head. Red diamond is actually part of the Vegemite logo, and obviously the coloring and the sludgy look on it based on Vegemite. And then it evolves into Vegemite, looking like a monster ghoul sludge monster kind of thing, covered in Vegemite, and you can see that logo for Vegemite on its head as well. Now, next I'm going to go into the pseudo legendaries and the legendary Pokemon for the region, but before we do, I'm going to show you the gimmick. This is called the Dreamscape, and some Pokemon, when you attach the Dreamscape to it, it changes form into a dream form. Now, while I'm showing you a few of these dream form Pokemon, because there are a lot, make sure you guys check out Sundorfakemon on Instagram. They are the artists for all of these Pokemon. All the information is down in the description below, so go and give them a follow. And there's actually quite a few Pokemon which I couldn't show in this video because otherwise the video would have been too long. So enjoy the look of these Pokemon. I think some of these are amazing, so make sure you support Sundorfakemon as well. And while you're doing that, don't forget to go down and like the video and also subscribe if you haven't before. Okay, now the pseudo legendaries for the region. There's actually two pseudo legendaries, and the first one is Hatchling, which is a pure water type, and it's based on a crocodile. It looks very, very cute. I love this, but you will notice in the tail it's actually got a hole, and that is because, let's see its evolution, that tail is actually becoming like a hydro cannon now. Now it's become a water and dragon type as it evolves into Dracodile, still based on our crocodile, but it's kind of got elements of Spinosaurus as well, which is a dinosaur that has a massive sail on its back like that. As you can see, when it evolves into Crocqua, a water and dragon type again, that tail almost looks like a jet engine. It is huge, and it uses that as a weapon for a massive hydro cannon. It is its signature move. And our other pseudo legendary is Ribblaze, which is a pure fire type Pokemon, and it combines a Beelzebuffu, which was a frog from the dinosaur era, but also combines a Yaramayahu, which is a mythological creature from the Aboriginal Dreamtime, which is kind of combines a red angry frog man together, but it has markings or colorings like this as well. It evolves into Brimtoad, which is now a fire and rock type Pokemon. You can see that jaw is getting quite big now, which becomes very clear as it evolves into Beelzebold. That massive jaw is almost like a cauldron now. It's full of fire as well. Very, very cool, combining those two elements to create what I think is an amazing looking Pokemon. Now we're going into our legendaries. There's 5 legendaries in this region. The first 2 are new Reggies. First one is Regiseer, which is a pure psychic type Pokemon, and the other Reggie is Regighoul, which is a pure ghost type Pokemon. And I love this. It almost looks like it's got a Duskull skull wrapped around it and some like bones around it as well. Now the next 2 are kind of like the box art legendaries. The first one is Thylantism, which is a normal and ghost type. Interesting to have a legendary that's a normal type, but this is actually based on the Thylacine, or the Tasmanian tiger, which is now extinct in Australia. But it looks like it's got a lot of spectral elements to it, especially coming off like the chest. Almost looks like a fire spectral element, which is interesting because it's not a fire type, but it has the stripes down its back as well, like the Thylacine. And the other one is Julgardon, which is actually based on a Yowie now. This is a grass and rock type Pokemon, and a Yowie is kind of like a bunyip, or it's like a monster or a beast from the Aboriginal Dreamtime, but is very creepy, very scary. And then the main legendary for the entire region is called Rainbowa. It is a fairy and water type Pokemon, and this is based off the Rainbow Serpent, which in Aboriginal Dreamtime again is what created the entire world. I think the coloring in this is very, very cool. Definitely fits a Rainbow Serpent based Pokemon, and it just looks very majestic. Like the expression, the wings on it, I think it looks very, very cool. So I love this as a legendary Pokemon. What did you think of the Sundor region, guys? My favorite Pokemon were Margold, the 2 pseudo legendaries, Crocqua and Beelzebold, and also Regighoul. They're my favorites. Let me know down in the comments what your favorites were as well. If you like these videos, guys, make sure you subscribe for more, and also check out my other Australian Fakemon region as well, and let me know what you think.